Welcome to knowledgeformen.com, where you're going to grow into the man you want to be. Your life will never be the same again. I can guarantee it. Hey guys, one of the questions I've been getting a lot lately is, can you put together a list of the best books and success quotes from all of your guests and combine that into one guide? And so I've actually just done that. It's called the top 30 books and success quotes every man must live by. So out of all of the podcast episodes I've done, over 60, I finally put together this guide, and you can download it for free at kfmfree.com. Again, that's kfmfree.com. All right, guys, welcome to the show. I'm here with Dan Peña, founder of the Quantum Leap Advantage, a revolutionary method of super success with over 20 years of a proven track record that has produced over $50 billion of equity value since 1993. Peña and his team have also helped guide mentees to 7 figures and as far as 11 figures in wealth creation. So, all right, enough said there. Dan, happy to have you on the show. How you doing today?
Great to be here. Thanks for asking me.
Absolutely. And Dan, so we kick start off every show with a favorite success quote of the guest or some sort of saying that the guest has lived by. So what do you got for us? And then go ahead and explain why you chose that.
Okay. I'm assuming that we don't have any children listening, but just fucking do it. Well, if you were 20 years old and put on the planet again, or if you're 25 and you had no money and you had to start all over again, et cetera, what would you do, Dan? And I say the same thing. Just fucking do it. If I've learned anything in my 6 decades of being a high-performance person, and especially in the last 20 plus years of coaching other people, it's that we procrastinate too much and we spreadsheet it to death. In the old days, we used to say we will Lotus 1, 2, 3 it to death because we're unsure, we're afraid of failure, etc. All the norms that we know intellectually, but we don't like to talk about. And just to get started, and just like Nike says, just do it, except I add the F word for just fucking do it. And the part of that has been taught to me in that, you know, we think we have 5 options in life, or we think we have 10 options in life, or we even think we have 3 options in life. And we don't know which one to start with. And especially now with Google, the kids all Google and they do all kinds of research. And the problem with the internet is you can get too much information, you can get overloaded. And it's called emotional flooding. Emotional flooding is when you have so much information coming in, even if you're bringing in the information, you don't know where to put your finger, you don't know where to start. And what I've learned, as Clausewitz, the famous Prussian general, taught, focus on the few, not the many.
Huh. And so your experience with helping thousands of people.
Hundreds of thousands.
Okay, hundreds of thousands of people. Has it been that fear of failure, the inability to take risk that is really holding people back?
Absolutely. I mean, in a nutshell, and fear is false expectations appearing real. But I mean, you know, like when we were a kid, and if we're in the dark and we squint and we look into the dark, we can see anything. We think we see ghosts. We think we see this, and it's our inability to overcome that fear of failure, that fear of surprise, that fear of the unknown. That's what keeps us from accomplishing more. And it doesn't just end when you're a kid. And it exacerbates itself, and it gets worse and worse and worse as we get older. And unfortunately, our parents, although they loved us, well, I'm giving the audience the benefit of the doubt that most parents loved us, that they're not trained to make us high-performance people. Unless you're really lucky, or by serendipity, you have got 2 Olympians as parents, and they're training you to be an Olympic athlete. The odds of your parents being able to train you to be a high-performance person are pretty close to 0.
I think that's really interesting to think about. Like, your parents, you know, were not these high performance people. Therefore, you are not going to be this high performance person. And that's why you have to make yourself a high performance person. And you have to like go out there and find people and surround yourself with people who are doing the things that they want to do and are crushing it. So, I'm excited. We have quite the episode here in front of us. So let's dive in now and go into your story of how you got started with what you do. So just go ahead and break down your story. So take the mic. It's all yours.
Well, although it's going to sound awe-inspiring to you in the audience, it was ugly because I had a lot of failure. But my claim to fame, or my what I'm infamous for, more or less, is I took $820, a leased fax machine, a phone, in the spare bedroom of my house that I couldn't afford, And I turned it into $450 million in 8 years in a collapsing market. And in fact, I'm going to go on to detail, but that's the basis of what I teach the kids the last 20 years in QLA. But I was CEO of a oil company, and the board decided to throw me out and I had nothing. So I said, well, I've got nothing. So, and I liked at that time the energy business, and the oil was at something like $40 a barrel, which sounds low now. So I found an energy company, and I said, Dan, who are the dumbest people on the planet? And I said, even then, well, it's normally the federal government are the dumbest people on the planet, our federal government being the U.S. government. And so I went and I came up with a legal method to get $50 million worth of business, two $20 million contracts, and a $10 million contract with the Federal Defense Fuel Center of the federal government. And I did $50 million in business with one employee, me, that lease fax machine and that phone in the spare bedroom of my house, selling petroleum products, mainly jet fuel, from an underutilized refinery in the eastern United States. And that was my start. And I still give the advice, federal government is the only place where they buy $600 for an ashtray and $3,000 for a toilet seat, which is well documented. And it's still a great place to start, although everything's now computerized. And I built that up, and I built it into an energy company that I eventually took public on the London Stock Exchange. And it had a market cap of about a little less than $500 million. And we were a fully integrated company, except for petroleum products sold in gas stations. And I did that by myself, ultimately having thousands of employees, ultimately getting into the coal business, being one of the biggest independent coal producers in the United States, ultimately getting into the drilling business, ultimately getting into the construction pipeline business. And I did it all starting with $820. And so when I hear kids today ask me all the time on Ask the $50 Billion Man podcast, well, how do I start with nothing? I tell them, and first of all, I think to myself, what the fuck? I mean, don't these kids have any imagination? And what has happened is, with the advent of the internet, that even though we have an abundance of information, we get overloaded with information. And getting back to what I said at the beginning of this, and we have so much information, we don't know where to start, and we don't know how to pull the trigger. One of my pet peeves, and it has been a pet peeve for a long, long time, for decades, and it's only been exacerbated in recent years, is that there's so much information, again, and we read so much and we listen to so much, we use that instead of pulling the trigger. We think that that's part of the process, when it's not part of the process. The process is learning, making mistakes, falling down. Now, you're based in San Diego. You probably had a bicycle when you were a kid, and you had training wheels, correct?
Yep, that's right.
Okay, and your mother didn't take off the training wheels until she thought that you were capable of riding and not falling off on your little head, correct?
Right.
Okay, well, what she should have done, I was so poor I had a possum for a dog, so I didn't have a training wheels and I didn't have a bike. But what we should have done with our kids, and I have 3 grown children, is let them fall over on their head and make mistakes. And that's what business and the learning process is all about, making those mistakes. But we read another book. We read a book on self-development. We read a book on how to do financial transactions. We read this book. We listen to this podcast, which is all great information. But again, we get emotional overload, and we don't know how to pull the trigger.
So what I'm getting from you is it's about not hesitating, not overthinking, like getting rid of information overload. And it's really just about taking action and just going for it.
In fact, I'll make another analogy. You go into a party, you go into a bar. You go into a bar and you see an attractive girl standing there with 2 other attractive girls, or by herself, doesn't matter. Guys will hesitate to go and say, can I buy you a drink? You look great tonight. I don't know what the lines are in today's market. But if you're with 2 or 3 guys, it's even worse, because then you talk to each other. Oh, I wonder what she'll say. I wonder if she'll say yes. Do you think she'll let me buy her a drink? Do you think this? Do you think that? And then it's almost like the short straw. The loser says, oh, I'll go ask her. Well, if we use the same approach in our business endeavors, I mean, you don't know if she's going to say yes until you ask her, correct?
Yep, that's right.
Okay, but you've got all this conjecture, you've got all this mental masturbation, pun intended, and you don't wind up asking her, and she gets up and leaves, and you say, "Oh, I woulda, I coulda, I shoulda." What's the same in business? What I try to do, and I'm very successful at it, is when you get old and you look back on your life, and old is relative to a guy as young as you and maybe some of your audience, you want to have the fewer regrets. You want to have regrets that could fit in a man's a man purse, a little purse, as opposed to a steam trunk on your back when you die. And we have too many regrets because we're lacking in taking action, and we're sorry for it as we get older. You ask people that are the older end of your continuum for demographics, if you could have lived your life over again, what would you have done? Just like they asked me. And most of them said, well, I wish I had taken this opportunity to leave my big corporation I worked for. Or I wish I'd asked this girl out who's now married to somebody else. And so the regrets that we have in life are massive, unfortunately. And in my life, I've had very, very few things that I regret. And in fact, it's probably less than 5. And what I tell people, and it's hard for them to believe, I wish I had set my goals higher. And my goals are pretty damn high. But I accomplished them all. And I accomplished them all in spades, and I accomplished them all in a very short period of time. How did I do that? Well, when I was young, and even now that I'm old, I'll be 70 my next birthday. I don't sound 70. I don't look 70. For those of you that see me or will see me on the various YouTube and my websites, when I think of it, I don't think about it more than a microsecond. If I like it, sounds hot, feels hot, looks hot, I try it.
Yeah, and now you've taken a lot of action. You've achieved a lot of things here. So can you take us back to a time, Dan, on your journey when you've encountered some sort of massive failure, and what happened and how did you bounce back from that?
I have a book called Your First 100 Million. That is a step-by-step chronology of how I turned $800 into almost $500 million. But I could write 100 books on all the things I screwed up and all the failures. You can't hit a home run unless you swing away. And I'll just give you a couple. I got a hold legally of a patent to compete, and actually was better than Kevlar. Everybody knows what Kevlar is. And the Kevlar is used in astronaut suits. Kevlar is also bulletproof in that people that shoot you. The Pope wears Kevlar robes. And so I thought I had the moon. I spent $4.5 million of my own money trying to develop in it, trying to get it into the market. DuPont, which has 96% of that market, the big chemical company, allegedly spent about $250 million keeping me out of the market. I spent 13 years fighting that. 13 years. Okay, everybody told me that DuPont would never relinquish that multi-billion-dollar market. I went and got a huge chemical company as a joint venture partner from Japan. After 5 or 6 years, I really knew in my heart that I was never going to make it. I went 6, 7 more years and then technology passed me by, and pretty soon my patent wasn't important because other people developed other products, and that's when they came out with Kevlar 2, 3, 4, 5. Or their equivalents thereof. And I spent 13 years and almost $5 million of my own money, essentially pissing in the wind. So we all make the mistake. I fell in love with the product. I thought I was going to change the world. And I've seen more deals die pride of authorship, meaning that they can't let loose of the deal if it's a loser, or pride of ownership, the same thing, then it's killed any kind of deal. We have to know, K-N-O-W, when to say no. And it's a very difficult process, extremely process to understand when to say no, knowing when to say no. And my whole principle, the basis of my theology, so to speak, is having a dream team, surrounding yourself with very experienced people, much more experienced than yourself, that know when to say no. And if I had listened more, which I didn't, and had surrounded myself more with, high performance people, because listen, you show me your friends and I'll show you your future. The kids that are listening to this, who are your friends? Are they where you want to be 5, 10, 15 years from now? because we're nothing more than the average of the 5 people we spend the most of the time with. Now, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, those 5 people when you're growing up are normally your mom, your dad, normally our mom more, an older brother, a sister, maybe raised by a grandmother, etc. But those people aren't trained, notwithstanding they love you. They're not trained to make you or allow you or lead you to being a high performance person. And they say is success, can it be nurtured? Absolutely. You're not born with the idea to be a billionaire. I mean, you develop it. When I was growing up, and I grew up in East Los Angeles, the barrio of East Los Angeles, and they call me as part of my journey, I'm the barrio kid that is now Laird of Guthrie Castle. I've lived in a castle 30 years, considered one of the most well-appointed homes in Britain. And I didn't get from the barrio mentality of gangbangers. And if you look at my website, I have my best attempt 20 years ago, a picture in front of where my house used to be, to look like a dressed up drug dealer. And then you have the picture next to it of 2013 and a bunch of other pictures. And I get the idea of living in a castle from my home in the barrio. I just didn't. And San Diego was considered the Nantucket of East Los Angeles, if you could get to San Diego. And a couple of my buddies went down to San Diego State and graduated, and they were considered the upper echelon. We didn't talk about going to Harvard. We didn't talk about going to Oxford. I have 2 friends that went to San Diego State, and they were the upper echelon. Now, as the finest school of San Diego State University might be, it's not considered one of the upper echelon schools on the planet. It isn't. But to me, when I was growing up, the kids that went to school down there were considered well-to-do. And by the way, I'm a graduate of CSUN, California State University, Northridge, and I was on the 8-year program. It took me 8 years to graduate. I flunked out of university 3 times. San Diego State is one of the ones I didn't flunk out of. And of course, I had 4 years in the military, the Vietnam War. But I'm a graduate of the state university system myself. And I didn't go to a proper school, although CSUN is reputed to be a good school in certain areas. And I didn't even go to any of the schools that it's supposed to be good in.
And just while we're on the topic of school and education, what role does schooling play in determining one's success in life?
Little or none. And I don't just use the fact that Zuckerberg and Gates dropped out of Harvard. As far as I'm concerned, they graduated from Harvard. And I have mentees that mentees that are high school students that were making enough money on the internet to come to the Castle seminar, not on my student program, that wanted to drop out of high school. And I draw the line. You got to finish high school. But a lot of the kids, I say, you're still young enough at 18, 19, even 20. Go out and see what you can do in the real world. And then if you want to go back and go to school, you're still young enough to do it. But although my kids all went to good schools and have multiple degrees, because I didn't go to a great school and I don't have multiple degrees, that's probably why I encouraged them to do it. But if you never went to university, the real issue is follow your passion, follow your heart. And I'm fortunate, and I'm a generalist. I love doing deals, and more recently, I love dragging kids across the goal line. The analogy I use, we've all seen the movie Forrest Gump, right? And you know how when Lieutenant Dan gets shot and he's dragging all the people, which he gets the Medal of Honor for, dragging them to safety with them on their back. One after another after another. That's me dragging you across the line of success, because I know what you can do. I know what you're capable of. And now that we've touched about 250,000 people in the last 20 years. And that's why I do these podcasts, because I'm happy that you asked me, but I don't have time to do podcasts. I'm extremely busy, but I make time because I realize that if I touch 5 or 10 or 15 of your audience, I will have considered this a tremendous success. And, measured in wealth terms, 50 billion, and it's really a lot bigger than that number, but I can only talk about 50 billion because the people deserve their anonymity if that's what they want. But see, almost everybody wants to create wealth for themselves, but not everybody wants notoriety. Not everybody wants their name published. And so the 50 billion I talk about are only the people that allow me to use their name. The number's a lot greater. But in terms of creating wealth, I'm the best high performance coach on the planet, and that's the legacy I want to leave.
So earlier you talked about you were the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with. So I'm wondering, what role has mentorship and your environment played in your success?
Oh, tremendous. I've had.
And also, at what age did you really start understanding the value of having mentors and surrounding yourself with the right people?
Well, the operative word there you just used is the value. I didn't understand the value until 20, 25 years after the process started. But I have 3 mentors. I was fortunate enough. I had Costa Gratsos, which was the CEO of Onassis Shipping Lines, the right-hand man to Aristotle Onassis for 60 years. And I had a gentleman named Jerry Orman, who was the founder of Orman Industry, which was the fastest growing company on the American Stock Exchange in the 60s and 70s and early 80s. And I had a gentleman named Jim Newman, who wrote a great book, Release Your Brakes, which is one of the only books I recommend anybody reads, who was the founder of the PACE, Personal and Company Effectiveness, basically talks about getting out of your comfort zone. And I was fortunate enough to get those guys. I wish that I had met those guys earlier, but I met them all in my 30s. And they helped to transform my life. I've had 4 or 5 other luminaries that I've been privileged to be in business with and mentored by. Bunker Hunt, who just passed away a few weeks ago, one of the billionaire Hunt brothers. And his famous line at a press conference said to me, he says, "Danny boy, if you're worried about paying taxes, it's because you're not making enough goddamn money." And which is a line that it should be on his tombstone. And that's one of the things that I've lived by. I don't worry about tax. I pay them. But if I'm worried about paying taxes, because I'm not doing well enough. So mentors are critically important. And in my seminar, I have these charts. And this is what Google and the internet's good for, where you can go back and show how much more successful businesses that have mentors against businesses that don't have mentors. Now, it's not a factor of 1 times better, 2 times better, 3 times better, 4 times better, 5 times better, but 5 to 15 times better, more successful are companies that have mentorship as opposed to the ones that don't. I'll just give you a couple of examples. When Bill Gates was looking to be, the most successful guy on the planet, he went to Warren Buffett, and he still is mentored to this day, who at that time was the most wealthy man on the planet. Warren's not anymore. He's one of the top 2 or 3. Ross Perot, which may be a little too old for some of your audience, had a mentor. His name is Joe Batten. Joe Batten actually was a partner of mine in business, but he came up with a line many years ago for the United States Army: be all that you can be. And the reason I bring up be all that you can be is because that's what my whole program, my whole life is devoted to the last 21 years, is I want the kids to be all they can be. Because again, I know what you're capable of. If a kid from the barrio like me, his dad was a cop, his mother was, and forgive me, Mom, for saying this, an illegal alien that came across the Rio Grande River from Mexico to Houston, Houston, Texas, and can achieve what I've achieved, just imagine what you can achieve. And mentors are great. And I mentor a lot of kids. And, many of the kids that I've mentored have created that $50 billion.
All right. So obviously having a mentor is an extremely effective way to learn and grow and shave off many years it would take someone if they were to do it on their own.
Correct.
So my question for you now, Dan, is how can someone get a high profile mentor when the up and coming guy, doesn't have much to offer, especially in comparison to that high profile guy?
You're in a poker game with no cards, but the high performance person is looking for passion that perhaps he's lost. When I was young, people used to say, "You remind me," for example, Mr. Grasso said, "You remind me of Aristotle Onassis when we were young." I've been in business with the Coors family. They said, "You remind me of my grandfather, the founder of Coors." I reminded them of people with passion, or I reminded them of themselves. What you have to offer is passion and integrity and your 20-hour days that you're willing to work. Now, that may fall on deaf ears about the 20-hour day that you're willing to work. But when you get older, I'm an exception to this rule because I still work 60, 70 hours a week, and I'm supposed to be retired. And but when you get older, you slow down, you cut back, and so you're looking for people to extend your legacy, so to speak. You want to give back. You want to give what you've attained in 20, 30, 40, 50 years of life. And that's what the young mentee offers. And you're not looking to your mentor for money. You're looking for him for his time, or her for his time. People often say, when they say, well, Mr. Peña is mentoring me, well, why doesn't he put money in this deal? And many years ago, one of my most successful mentees, she said, no, I don't want Mr. Peña's money. His time is more valuable, my time is more valuable. And so what you're offering the potential mentor is your ability to energize things.
Right. And I've heard that for a number of times from other high performing guys like yourself, that it's really that energy, that drive and all that. So this is what you do, is like you take people and you help them become more successful. So how do you take someone who has passion, energy, and drive and then turn that person into a success? So where do you start?
Well, ostensibly, they're already successful because they have passion and energy. And quite frankly, I mean, you're in this business of helping men develop themselves to, it's not your mantra, but to be all they can be. And so they're already successful in that they're differentiated from everybody else because they have this desire to be more, to be all that they can be. It sounds simple, but it's not. All I do is hone those skills in and get you to be laser beam focused on something that you love, something that you're willing to work 15 hours a day to do. And if you consider it work, it's not your passion. I mean, I sound passionate about this because I know I'm giving out a message to a lot of people. I don't sound like I'm going to be 70 on my next birthday. So I take that young person and I laser beam focus on something that he's passionate about. And I also teach him, coach him, mentor him, that if it doesn't work out, he can pivot. That's a very common word used now. He can pivot, or he can morph his idea, and not to give up. And not to stay too long on the course like I did that 13 years that I spent almost $5 million of my own money. And but I believe in tough love. My dad invented tough love in the 50s, and the term tough love didn't come out until the 70s. I don't candy coat anything, and I'm very harsh. I'm tough as nails, and I expect that. And I know it's partially because of my dad raising me. My dad was a tough disciplinarian, and partially because my first real career was as an Army officer in the United States Army in the 60s. And I learned discipline going through infantry OCS, Officers Candidate School. And it's really the first high performance thing I ever did was graduating in July of 1967 and being called an officer and a gentleman by the United States Congress. An act of Congress made me an officer and a gentleman, the barrio boy. And that meant something to me. And the rest was really history, as they say. I came back, went to school, graduated, ultimately with honors. I had to finish a 4-year degree because when all you have is D's and F's, they don't count. Well, I guess D's might count towards graduation, but I know F's don't. And I finished a 4-year degree. I essentially had to start from scratch in 2.5 years. I took as much as 26 units per semester. Now, you being a San Diego State, potentially Playboy, you know what it is to take 26 units a semester. And you know what it is to finish a 4-year degree of 128 units in 2.5 years. You got a hump. And you know what that means to finish with graduating with honors, taking 26 units a semester.
Yeah, so obviously you're a massive action taker there, and you've achieved quite a lot, to say the least. And a part of that is the quantum leap advantage. So I want to talk about this and share with the audience what is the quantum leap advantage, and just kind of elaborate on this and how it can add value to my listeners.
Yeah, the QLA, and it was, again, for those of you that are old enough to remember, there used to be a program called Quantum Leap in the 90s. And it's where a young man went from time zone to time zone, and all of a sudden he'd be in the Civil War, all of a sudden he'd be in World War II, all of a sudden he'd be in the future. And that's where I got the idea of Quantum Leap. Based on the Dream Team, and you have such an advantage. It's geometric advantage, but I didn't think, or at the time, it didn't sound like geometric leap advantage. So I came up with the idea of quantum leap. because you have such an advantage. To this day, I have emails and kids tell me all the time, I don't know exactly why it works, but Quantum Leap is magic. And it's not important that you Google and understand how Quantum Leap works. But now Quantum Leap is a phrase that everybody uses. Accenture, the big consulting company, uses it as part of their mantra. You hear about Quantum Leap, all the time, because it is a leap that you're ready to make, a move that you're ready to make, that you don't know you're ready to make until you try it. And it's quite simple. I didn't phrase or coin the phrase when I was doing it. I just did it. And again, even though I didn't understand, just fucking do it, I took action, and I still take action. And the whole idea behind the Quantum Leap methodology, of course, now we've got 21 years of success for others. Because when I first started coaching in 1993, and I gave my first seminar in 1993 in Los Angeles, I was an anomaly. And most people, sadly to say, would say, I don't have dance communication skills. I'm not an alpha male. I'm not gregarious. I'm not a this. I'm not an A personality. They had all these kind of reasons why they thought they couldn't take $820 and turn it into $450 million. And so it was tough sledding. A lot of people laughed and said, you're never going to be able to teach kids to do this. Now, 21 years later, with as many successes that I've had, they don't say that. But it's like anything else. I mean, the first 5 to 10 years were tough. I'm the only high performance coach that we know of that doesn't make a living doing this. I made a bunch of money, and then I started coaching and mentoring. Most of the guys that are in the business have to put asses on seminar seats and sell books and DVDs and CDs to make a living. I give all my product away for free. I have 400 or 500 pages of content on my site, and it's free. And I don't sell product anymore. I tell people to go to Torrent. I didn't know Torrent was around until just recently. If I'd known it was around, I would have given the product away from the beginning. And I say to go to Torrent to get all my product. So I'm doing this not for the love of humanity, so don't make me too much of Mother Teresa, but because I don't want you to be able to say, oh, dance product's too expensive, or I can't afford dance product. I'm eliminating another reason, another alibi why you can't be successful by giving you the product. The only reason I charge for my seminar at the Castle, my Castle seminar, is because I want it to be a high barrier to entry. Because after the 8-day seminar, I mentor you for free for a year. So I want you to pay the price to action. I want you to have skin in the game. For me to spend a year on you. We just finished a seminar in October, or actually the first few days of November. There were 16 guys there from all over the world, a couple of luminaries, an actor that you probably know his name if I told you, which I won't. And but it's all for free. And QLA is the love of my life now, and it's what I'm going to spend the next years that I'm around. And as healthy as I am, I'm sure I'll live into my hundreds. And I'm lucky enough that I have good, great genes in my family. So, but QLA is a methodology, step by step, starting with zero. And people ask me, Dan, why do you say start with zero? Because that's what I started with, zero. I had nothing. And again, if you look at my site and you saw where I lived, you'd understand that I probably not only had zero, I was probably deeply in debt.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at the site right now, and you got the castle here. It's in Scotland.
The castle's in Scotland. It's a 15th century storybook home that I've been there over 30 years, and it's impressive by anybody's standards.
Yeah, it looks really beautiful there. And so now, Dan, it's time that we enter the knowledge round. So I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions here. Are you ready for the knowledge round?
Yeah, I am.
All right, guys, if you're not reading books, then you're getting left behind. Somebody spent their entire life learning some invaluable lesson, and the best format that anyone could ever put it in is a book. It's the shortest, fastest, simplest way to consume content. So I know there are so many books available, and we talk about books all the time on the podcast. So there must be so many running through your head, and you're wondering, where do I begin? Well, I've compiled the top 30 books and success quotes from all of my guests in the last 100 episodes. So you can get them all for free. If you go to kfmfree.com, you can simply download the top 30 books that every man must live by. Again, that's kfmfree.com. Welcome to the Knowledge Round, where the guests will be asked rapid-fire questions to give the audience invaluable pieces of wisdom to help transform their lives. Starting in 3, 2, 1, showtime. All right, Dan, and first question here. What advice would you give to someone who's feeling kind of lost or unsure of what their purpose is?
I would say focus on the few. You're thinking about too many things. Take one thing that's important in your life, one thing that you can find passion for, and follow that dream. In 2014, almost in 2015, while I understand that happens, it's fixable, and I don't like to use that word fixable, but it can be changed. But find something that you're passionate about. Everybody likes something more than a bunch of other things. Find that and follow that.
All right, I like it. And Dan, what was holding you back from becoming the man you are now today?
My barrio background and thinking small and not understanding, and this is the truth, I didn't know how many zeros was in $1 million, until I was 20. And once I got out of my environment that I was used to, and saw that there was another way of life, I realized that anything was possible.
All right. And can you name someone who's had a large impact on your life, like a mentor? And can you share a specific moment that you guys had that was really impactful for both of you?
Well, I mentioned the three mentors that I had, Costa Gratsos, Jim Newman, and Jerry Ormond. But Costa Gratsos told me the reason for the success of Onassa Shipping Lines is they basically only did one thing: focus on the few, not the many. They focused on shipping. When they got into the airline business and tried to own hotels, etc., they failed. And that was probably the soundest advice: focus on the few, not the many.
Yeah, that's a common challenge there that I think a lot of us face. But now, I know this will be a tough question for you, but what are your 3 most influential books? And then explain why these are your favorite books.
Well, this is going to sound strange to you kids, but I don't believe in reading books. A lot of books. But I'm going to because you spend time reading books and not taking action. But I've read probably 10 or 12 or 13 books in my whole life, and I've read 4 or 5 of them many, many times. My own book, Your First 100 Million, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, Release Your Brakes by Jim Newman, and I like the E-Myth by Michael Gerber. Not all his E-Myth 2, 3, and 4, but the original E-Myth, which focuses on working on your business, not in your business, because all of us, myself included, get bogged down with the day-to-day minutia and not building your business, just working in it, putting out fires. So those 3 books, other than my own.
All right, so let's talk about that, what you said earlier. So you're not a big fan of reading books because it prevents you from taking a lot of action. Okay, so point well taken, but I do read. I read a ton of books, but I also take action. So I just read in my spare time. So kind of just like elaborate more on this.
There's a difference. If you're reading books for enjoyment, that's great. Read a novel. But if you're reading business or personal development books, it's because you got a void someplace. You're not reading personal development books because for enjoyment like reading Shakespeare. You're reading personal development books because there's a hollow thing in your body. In your chest, there's a void. And so I'm not counting the books that I read, Shakespeare. I like Othello. I'm not talking about those books. I've read a ton of those books. I'm talking about the books that you're talking about. You may never read Shakespeare. There's a big difference.
All right. Well, point well taken. There are an endless sea of personal development and business books out there, but I'm going to continue reading. I'm going to continue taking action and finding time for both. Well, I want to move on to the next question here. So let's talk about what 2 or 3 skills do you need to succeed in business?
Number 1 is self-esteem, which is very tough to get, and most people don't have, but it can be built, and partially through a mentor system. And number 2, part of that self-esteem is communication skills. The current generation's communication skills are pretty poor, but they can be developed. And you develop communication skills by practice. And when you build self-esteem through your communication skills, or I should say with your communication skills, those are the basics, the precepts for excellence in life.
Yeah. All right. And now, scenario here for you, Dan. Imagine you had 60 seconds with your 20-year-old self. What would you tell him to do, and what would you tell him not to do?
Focus on the few, not the many. Just fucking do it, and find a mentor.
All right. And anything you would tell him not to do?
Well, not to do is listen to conventional wisdom. Listen, unless the person or persons are where you want to be, tune out, turn off, like a hearing aid, turn off whatever they're saying. Again, unless they are where you want to be, turn it off. Don't listen. Because why would you listen? If you wanted to be a 400 hitter in baseball, would you listen to Ted Williams? This may be too old for you guys, who got the highest batting average of ever. Or would you listen to some Little League coach, coaching 8-year-olds, and you're in the major leagues? You're going to listen to Little League coach or Ted Williams?
Exactly. So what did you mean by conventional wisdom? Can you give some examples of what common conventional wisdom is and what type of stuff we should avoid?
Virtually everything. Okay, the world is flat. We're never going to have a lighter than air plane or lighter than air vehicles that can float in the sky. We're never going to go to the moon. I can go on and on and on and on. Okay. Conventional wisdom is, a barrio boy can't, live in a castle. A kid with no education or didn't go to college can't be a billionaire. 60% of the billionaires never went to college, or aren't college graduates, I should say. The conventional wisdom is a kid from San Diego State can't have the leading podcast that you're considered to be in. Conventional wisdom is there's no cure for cancer. Conventional wisdom is we're never going to outlive the use of hydrocarbons that are in the ground. It's on and on and on. Conventional wisdom is almost always wrong.
So there are no rules, basically.
The only rule is there are no rules. You're stealing part of my seminar.
All right, so anything can be done. If a man wants to do something, he sets out to do it, he can get it done.
Yeah, correct. And he takes action. You can't have a dream come true unless you have a dream, like the words in South Pacific. And as Walt Disney's brother, told me many years ago, when value is clear, and this is really important for the kids, when values are clear, decisions are easy. I'm going to say it again. When values are clear, decisions are easy. The reason why the kids have so much hardship and trouble making decisions is because the fucking values aren't clear. Down deep in the recesses of their brain, they know the value's not clear, no matter how many books they read. That's why decisions are so bloody hard. But when values are clear, decisions are easy.
Yeah, I think that really puts things into perspective and makes it easier to make those important life decisions. So now, Dan, reflecting back to where you were in the barrio in East Los Angeles to where you are now in a castle in Scotland, and having helped a number of people become multimillionaires and creating so much wealth for yourself and so many other people, what is your philosophy on life and success?
Well, money's not everything, contrary to what a lot of people think about me, but it's the only thing anybody keeps track of. And I've said this line, it's become kind of infamous now. I didn't mean it to be infamous when I said it not long ago, but the reason my lifestyle is different than yours and probably everybody that's listening is that I have more choices in life because I've accomplished a lot and I've created a lot of wealth. My wife is also in the same category. But when your mother gets sick and she has dementia, and your father's got emphysema, spitting up blood, and your daughter is a special needs child, et cetera, it costs money to assist. Not you can buy all those things with money, not Zen. And the fact that I'm able to support orphanages and schools in Africa and the various things that I do, which I'm not looking for a pat on the back, is because I've created wealth. And so my focus in life is not now to create wealth for myself, but to create wealth for others, because I want them to have the choices so they can do the good things in life like I'm doing now and have done for many decades. If you don't like global warming, which I'm not a proponent of, but if you don't like global warming, make a bunch of money and do something about it. Look at Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Look what he's done the last 10 or 15, 20 years. Look at Warren Buffett and all the other people, that Michael Bloomberg and their big foundations. They're doing good with their money. They're not just complaining how the world's all fucked up. They're not just sitting around and saying that we ought to do more for the poor. They're actually doing more for the poor. And so my main goal in life now is to create as many more wealthy people so they can go do good on the planet as I'm doing along with my wife today.
Yeah, and I think that's a good message to really pass along. I know a lot of people think that like trying to attain wealth is selfish, and you're just doing it for yourself. But through the wealth creation, you can turn around and then help others.
Yes, and speaking of selfish, one of my principles is to be more selfish. If you don't love yourself, you can't love anybody else. And most people, and the reason why they lack self-esteem is because they don't feel good about themselves. And the way you feel good about yourself is you hang around with people that have high self-esteem. And the truth of the matter is, high performance people are like eagles. They fly alone. You don't see Donald Trump, and not everybody might not like Donald, but he does a lot of good things that he doesn't advertise. He doesn't hang with people. Bill Gates doesn't hang. Steve Jobs, God rest his soul, didn't hang. Zuckerberg doesn't hang. And so, I mean, remember, you show me your friends and I'll show you your bloody future.
All right, and Dan, that's going to conclude the knowledge round right there. So what's next for Dan Peña? Like, what's exciting you today? Go ahead.
I'm chuckling because, well, I mean, I get up early and I go to bed late because I spend about a third of my time pro bono mentoring kids for free. And there's 50 or plus kids that I mentor on my year program from the Castle Seminar. And I know their businesses as well as they know their own businesses. And that takes a lot of time. Now, fortunately, I've done so many deals that I can intellectually understand the businesses and I can easily adapt. And that keeps me excited. And one of the reasons I continue to coach is I'm dealing with young kids like yourself. And it keeps me sharp. It keeps me, up to date. I'm not sitting in a rocking chair. And so the mentor program, the QLA mentor program, keeps me excited. I'm involved in several businesses that could change the world, one of which is in alternative energy, one of which is in medicine, one of which is in how we grow plant life. And those are just three. But if I wasn't doing this and I wasn't being involved in not necessarily an hour by an hour, but at least a week to week basis, I wouldn't know what's on the cutting edge. And speaking of edge, Ross Perot told me many years ago, and he's a current billionaire. I ran for president against. He's the reason George Bush didn't get to be president twice because he cut off 23% of the vote, and Mr. Clinton got to be president. He said, Dan, success is on the cutting edge of failure. If you're not failing, you're not stepping out of your comfort zone. You're not swinging away. And if you don't swing away, you can never hit a home run. So you kids are what are getting me out of bed every day. And by the way, I call everybody kids because I'm old enough to be at least their father on this podcast and probably their grandfather.
All right, Dan, go ahead and give yourself a plug on how the audience can follow up with you moving forward.
Well, I mean, danpeña.com is my website with all the free content. If you want to submit a question, you have an opportunity, and it wins the contest. I'm picking 5 winners this year. Before the end of the year, I want to announce one of which will go to the Castle Seminar for free on me. The other 4 will get to spend an afternoon with me somewhere in the world on my travels, depending on where they live, to pick my brain if they have the winning question or one of the winning questions. And of course, the Castle Seminar, which I had 4 last year, and I hopefully we'll have at least that many this year. The first seminar is in January, the 17th or 16th, for 8 days at my castle. And but the more important part of that castle seminar is that I mentor you for free for a year. And you have to submit me weekly reports. We have monthly conference calls with the whole group, and it's pretty exciting. I have nothing to sell. I give everything away free. And if that doesn't differentiate me from everybody else, kids, now just think. I'm being slightly facetious now, but think real fucking hard. Who else gives all their shit away for free? Who else has created 50 billion plus with his mentees, not his own money? If you can find that person, let me know and I'll retire today. And I will kiss his ass on Times Square in New York City.
All right, Dan, that's a good plug. Someone's going to do some research and find somebody who does that, and who knows? All right, well, Dan, thank you so much for your time and sharing your story and some of your life lessons here with my community. I appreciate all that you have done for me and my community. Take care.
Well, and I wish you good luck in your podcast. And you got that many downloads. You just crossed a million in a year. You're obviously doing something right. And obviously, there's a market for what you're doing. And so, if there's any way I can be helpful to you, don't hesitate to call.
All right, guys, that's going to wrap up episode 124 with Dan Peña.